All right, good evening. Welcome to, well, good afternoon, I suppose. Good afternoon. Welcome to Bible Geography, Week 6. Week 6 already, I know. It's crazy how time flies by. We're looking to have 12 weeks, maybe 11, depending on how the schedule works out. Well, I guess it depends on y'all if we have 11 weeks or 12. Because this week and next week, we are meeting, of course, here at 4:30. Today, because of the quote-unquote big game, not to run afoul of any registered trademark expressions of the National Football League, Puppy Bowl. Because of the Super Bowl tonight, next week we meet at 4:30 because the McNeils are here in the evening. Spring break week depends on if y'all want to meet as this class or not. I know the other classes are giving the options to their people if they want to meet or not. So even if you can't be here, if enough of y'all express, let's just keep moving on and meet the week of spring break, we can do that. If not, we just lose a week and whatever. But we can cross that bridge when we get there in in a few weeks from now. But this week we jump into the Valley of Jezreel, and we're just going to kind of cover the Valley of Jezreel and then also see how far we can get into the Galilee regions, Lower Galilee, so we can hopefully get ahead of the pace a little bit. But who would like to open us up in a word of prayer before we jump in? All right, thanks.
Father, we thank you for this time we've been together, Father, to look at your word, Father, and Lord, the country, ties to your word, Father. Lord, just pray to be that. Lead us, Father, and just Lord, this is the lead there. Get us on track. Pray in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so much. All right, we crossed the Sumerian hills on our northward journey throughout the country, and we end up into the Valley of Jezreel. We'll see in a little bit who else goes from this region and spills into the valley north of Jezreel also. But let's kind of take a geographical fly through this part so you can get a good sense of the region. It's the northern part of the country, and what area is this? Do you remember? This river that flows down? This is the Jordan Rift. So from the Jordan Rift, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and kind of go on the ground level. From the Jordan Rift, we can hop into the Valley of Jezreel. We're going to go by Beit Shan, we're going to go by Rehob, and all along the south, you will see mountain ridges that establish this geographical boundary into the Valley of Jezreel. And on the north side, there's various hills and valleys. But we kind of go into this arrowhead-shaped valley. It is wide, it is fertile, it is beautiful, it is temperate up there, and it's just wonderful country. And there's Mount Gilboa to the south, and then as we look to the south, Mount Carmel Ridge kind of spills off into the sea. We'll see this here. You see kind of this mountain ridge as we go from the Judean and Sumerian hills that cuts off the Valley of Jezreel in the north. And if we were to fly off, Mount Carmel flows out into the sea. Looking at it from the west, we can kind of see that. Now remember, none of the mountains in Israel are like super tall. These aren't Colorado mountains. These are big hills. But this is a mountain ridge. This is Mount Carmel. And if we were the winds of the Mediterranean Sea flowing, coming in off the sea, we come into the Valley of Jezreel. We're just going to do the same thing from the other direction. We kind of cut through. On the south, we have mountain ridges. And we'll stop and we'll look at this. Okay? We're looking east, kind of from on top of Mount Carmel, but we're hovering above it. And we can see how the valley, this wide valley, spills into the Jordan Rift down there. Mount Gilboa is on the south. The hill of Morah is here with a few locations. Off into the distance, this Mount Tabor pokes up out of the ground. Remember, Pastor mentioned Mount Tabor this morning as one of the locations that is honored as the place of the Transfiguration. I seriously doubt it's at Mount Tabor. I think it's Mount Hermon. But on the north side of the Valley of Jezreel, we kind of have the Nazareth Ridge. So this big valley where large swaths of biblical history occur is kind of framed by these hills. Okay, so you kind of see this arrowhead-shaped valley here. Now, this valley, of course, is super important in antiquity. We'll put up our sites. Bloop. As the international traffic is coming in from the north, where do they want to go? Anybody who's anybody is traveling to Egypt. So they come down the Hula Valley. They have to kind of, and we'll see this in a couple weeks, they have to go by Capernaum, right? Especially in Jesus' day. This is why he sets up his base of operations in his ministry at Capernaum. It's very strategic. Remember the Old Testament strategy of evangelism. What was it? Yes, Israel, stay home. I'm going to bring the world to you and through you. As the world's traffic is passing through Israel, they should have seen a testimony of God's greatness from Israel as they pass through. So it was stay home. And Jesus ministers in the Old Testament context, under the law, as a member of the nation of Israel. Jesus continues that Old Testament strategy of evangelism. Stay home. This is what he does at Capernaum. And as the world's, because it was Herod's taxing station. As the world's traffic came by, Jesus is there ministering to the world. We'll talk more about that as we talk about Galilee. So they come through by Mount Arbel, by the horns of Kittim. They come up. And now, as they're traveling to Egypt, they can go west in the Turon Ridge, by Hanathon down the Shimron Pass there, or they can continue south by Mount Tabor and cut across the valley. At some point, they're having to pass through the Carmel Ridge. And they have a few options. They can pass by the city of Jokneam. You can see this pass here, controlled by the town of Jokneam. They can be taxed there and slowed down, and the people that live in Israel can be like, what are you doing? They can pass through Megiddo. We'll come back there. They can pass through Ta'anak, not as often as they would, but you can access the Via Maris, the way of the sea, from by Ta'anak. If you're going through Ibleam, you're probably going to Samaria. Most of the world is passing right by this one, Megiddo. So we'll start our adventure here. We're looking up Mount Carmel. Remember Elijah, prophets of Baal. He slaughters the prophets down in the Kishon River. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's the Kishon River, what's left of it now. There's the town of Jokneam. Megiddo. Okay. All the world's traffic is passing by Megiddo. Whoever controls Megiddo controls the flow of the world's traffic. Megiddo, I dare say, is the most strategic location in all of the ancient world. Okay? Now you get into biblical times and Israel inhabits the land. Jerusalem, obviously, is the most important location in Israel. But Megiddo is the most strategic, militarily and everything. Megiddo has 26 layers. This is like a layer cake. 26 layers of occupation on this big tell. It's been conquered and rebuilt so many times. When we are here together, in this class, we're cruising by the pins and we're just saying one or two things about each one. When we go to a biblical site, we will spend time here. We will wander around this big tell. And pretty much anywhere I take you, I can tell you about 20 or 30 things about this tell specifically. So we'll have time to point out more things and you can kind of absorb more of the culture of the times and what things were like in the ancient days. But Megiddo, this was one of Solomon's fortified cities, one of his chariot cities. Golden Star, to anybody who can remember, his three major fortified chariot cities. What were they? I just told you one of them. Megiddo. We have Hatzor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Those three were the ones that Solomon fortified, and those were the strategic locations as the world's traffic is coming through. But Megiddo here, this was the town that Thutmose III said, I'd rather have Megiddo than 1,000 towns. And you can, if you control Megiddo, you can see the world's traffic coming from any direction. And you control it, you can tax it. And if there's an army that comes a conquering, they have to get by you. Okay, you can see Mount Tabor over there, the Hill of Moreh, Nazareth Ridge, and this is Megiddo. Now, Napoleon had something to say about the Jezreel Valley. Napoleon said the Jezreel Valley is the world's most natural battlefield. Okay, Megiddo. The Hebrew word for hill or mountain is Har. Har Megiddo is Armageddon. Armageddon is not so much an event as it is a place. It is the battle at Armageddon. What it actually is in future days, the Antichrist will assemble whatever armies of the world he can in the valley of Jezreel at Armageddon, basically, at the hill of Megiddo. He's assembling the world's armies here. The battle doesn't happen here. He assembles them here. They go to march on Jerusalem. Jerusalem is what they care about. Why gather the world's armies when you don't think you need that many to take over Jerusalem? That's part of the psychological warfare. It's the point the Antichrist is making. I'm going to get you, Jerusalem, you're done. And of course, the armies of the Antichrist are the ones that will be the done ones. Okay, when Jesus returns, steps foot on the Mount of Olives. When we're in Jerusalem, I'll show you that. Anyway, that's Megiddo. It's so important in biblical history. And several things happen there. It'll pop up from time to time as you're reading through your Bible, and like, oh, then he died. Josiah dies at Megiddo or whatever. You'll see it from time to time. Ta'anak is another pass that they could have made. Ibleam, again, you're going by Ibleam if you are going south to Samaria. So those are the southern towns, kind of on the Carmel Ridge, that are the choke points to the world's traffic. Very, very important. Moving along this southern ridge, it kind of juts up north a little bit, is we have Mount Gilboa here. You kind of see this, how it's also framing the Valley of Jezreel even more drastically. Okay, so Mount Gilboa, what happens here in biblical history? What do you remember Mount Gilboa for? An important person dies on the slopes of Mount Gilboa after a battle with the Philistines. This is Saul. Saul and Jonathan die here in this battle. We'll read through that. Let's go to 1 Samuel 28. 1 Samuel 28. Before we do that, though, well, as you're turning there, this is Jezreel, the town of Jezreel. This was Ahab and Jezebel's summer palace town that they have, and this is where Jehu comes charging on his chariot to kill Jezebel, throw her down from the window. If you look down from the hill of Jezreel, there's this copse of trees here. There's a spring here. This is wonderful land, arable land, and in this vicinity, they've found some ancient wine press installations. Okay, some really nice ones. And if you're Ahab, you're the king of the northern tribes, and you're at Jezreel, and you look out, you're surveying your kingdom, and you're like, that is a beautiful piece of land. Those vineyards are great. Oh, man, I'd love to have that. Oh, problem, who owns it? Naboth. Naboth owns it. Not problem, I'm the king. It should be mine, okay? Problem, Naboth owns it. Not problem, I'm the king. I'm just going to take it. You can read all about that. And God is none too pleased with Ahab for that. That likely, I think, is kind of Naboth's vineyard area. And when you're standing at Jezreel, you can see this so clearly. Jezreel is wonderful because it's great for the vantage points you get, and you can survey the Valley of Jezreel. You can look to the west and see Mount Carmel popping up there and think about Elijah. You look north to the hill of Morah. You have Ophrah, Shunem, Nain, Endor. You can look east, excuse me, Mount Gilboa down into the Jordan Rift. Okay. Ein Herod, we should come back to that maybe. Okay, remind me, what's Ein Herod if I forget to talk about it when we talk about Gideon? Okay, so Mount Gilboa, 1 Samuel 28. Let's go there. 1 Samuel 28. Now, we're going to zoom out a little bit. We have Mount Gilboa right here in the southern portion of our screen. North across the valley a little bit and the hill of Morah, we have Shunem, a town called Shunem. Remember the Shunammite woman? This is where Elisha comes, and he would visit there because she had the prophet's chamber. You know, she would open up her guest room to Elisha, and so he would stop at Shunem in his travels. But 1 Samuel 28, in those days the Philistines gathered their forces for war to fight against Israel. Achish says to David, okay, you can't come with me. I'll make you my bodyguard for life, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, okay, we don't care about that. Samuel died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city, down further south. Saul had put the mediums and necromancers out of the land. There's a bit of foreshadowing. That was a good thing he should have done, because God only wants you to approach him for the direction of your life. That's why necromancy, fortune tellers and stuff are not good. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. Remember when we looked at the valley of Elah, and there was a valley between them on the hillsides, the Philistines on one side and Saul on the other? Well, here we kind of have a rematch here. Philistines are up at Shunem, occupying this part of the valley. Saul gathered all Israel, and they camped at Gilboa, probably on the slopes of Gilboa here. Excuse me. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Then, excuse me, Saul said to his servants, "Seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "Behold, there is a medium at Endor." So, Endor is on the northeastern slope of the hill of Moreh. Now, look at this. Philistines at Shunem, Israel at Gilboa. Where does Saul have to go to find the medium, the witch? He has to sneak around enemy lines, doesn't he? He's desperate. This isn't just like, oh, I found a witch, over here. He has to sneak around the Philistines in his desperation, because God is not answering him, to get to Endor. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, and a Ricola. Sweet. In his desperation, he's got to get over to Endor. And then so, she summons Samuel, who's the most surprised, by the way, that Samuel shows up. The witch of Endor. She's like, whoa, this isn't supposed to work. I think that actually was God allowing Samuel to go. And one last time, Samuel chiding Saul. You're going to lose the battle, you're going to die. Okay, so he goes to the town of the Ewoks, Endor, to find the witch. And the hill of Moreh on the north side is Nain. This is where Jesus raises the widow's son at Nain. Ophrah, that's where Gideon is from, not Oprah, Ophrah. Remember, there was another Ophrah down in the Samaritan hills, or North Judean hills, but Ophrah is where Gideon is from. To save time, we won't read through Gideon. I'll just tell you that the Ein Harod, Ein means spring, just across the valley. Before Gideon is going to go to battle with the Midianites, God slims down the fighting force, and this happens at Ein Harod. There's a spring here, where he brings the men to, whoever laps the water can go fight. What's the point of how they drink the water? Some people like to kind of spiritualize that and say, oh, the way they drank the water made them prepare for it. It was arbitrary. It was God's way of too many people, you need a small force to make it impossible for you to win this battle, so that when you do, you're not going to claim credit for it. Everybody can see this is God achieving victory. Okay, so that was the point of whittling down the number of men at Ein Harod. Anyway, Saul dies. Remember what the Philistines do to Saul? They chop off his head and they sling his body from the walls of Bethshan. Bethshan is over here. We'll look at Bethshan in more detail in a few weeks. It's a really interesting place, especially in the Roman era. But they sling his body from the walls of Bethshan. I have a rock from the walls of Bethshan. I didn't bring my collection today. It has Saul's blood on it. It's amazing. Who rescues the body of Saul and his sons? Not David. He honors the men that do this, the men from Jabesh Gilead, right across the rift. So as these things are happening, you can see these places are close to each other. It's like, why would the people from Jabesh Gilead care? Oh, they could see it. From their town, they're staring at Bethshan across the way, and they're like, man, we can almost smell Saul's body from here as the wind carries it across. We need to do something about this. David honors the men for doing that for Saul. Saul was God's anointed, even though God rejected him from being king, David really respected the office, so he honors him that way. But that is the southern edge of the Valley of Jezreel, going from west to east. Okay? Now, we talked about the Hill of Morah, the towns around there. Let's go to Judges 4. This is an interesting exercise. I love doing this as you're in the Word and you match it up with the map. I've had something tickling my throat for 2 weeks now. It's annoying. Okay, here. Popping up out of the Valley of Jezreel is Mount Tabor. And this thing really is this dramatic and pronounced. And it's just there on its own, rising from the valley floor. On top of Mount Tabor, there's a church and an old monastery that an old Byzantine church as well was there, commemorating the possible place for the Transfiguration. Again, I don't think that was here, Mount Tabor. I do think it was in Mount Hermon in the northeast. But you can see kind of the switchback roads heading up there. We're going to be reading through a narrative where Mount Tabor plays prominently. I'm going to zoom out to try to capture the Valley of Jezreel. Now, Judges 4. This is after Ehud and Jericho plunges the dagger into Eglon. The people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died, and the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned at Hatzor. Hatzor, it's a huge tell. It's pretty much the biggest tell in Israel. It is massive. It was the seat of power of the northern Canaanites. Remember, Joshua had to fight against these guys as the king of Hatzor kind of rallied the troops around him from the north. But Jabin, which is more of a dynastic title like Pharaoh, Caesar, king, most likely, he was king of Hatzor up there, seat of power in Judges 4. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim, which is somewhere around here on the west by the Mediterranean. Then the people of Israel cried out for help, and he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Remember, in the cycle of the Judges, this is God handing over his people to foreign powers because of their faithlessness and sin. Now, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. Remember those places? Hill country of Ephraim, Ramah, Bethel. So somewhere between here, she would, set up and people would come to her. She sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali. So Barak is from Naphtali. Kadesh Naphtali up here. And said to him, "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, taken 10,000 from the people of Naphtali for the people of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon." Remember, Kishon flows. Kishon's sourced actually at Mount Gilboa, flows across the valley, up by Mount Carmel, out into the Mediterranean Sea. That's the river Kishon. Today, it's a narrow tree line that you can see. It would have been more raging in this time. His chariots and his troops I will give him into your hand. Barak said to her, now here's Barak. I'm not as hard on Barak as some people are. Some people think that this is just some abject, faithless wussiness of Barak. I don't think it's quite that. But he said, if you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. Basically, that's his way of saying, I will only go if the Lord is in this. Okay, yeah, he should have just said, yep, okay, up, ready, and go. But anyway, I do want the Lord to be in this. Deborah, you are judging the people. We recognize this. She said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah isn't saying, I'm going to get the glory of this. She's going to say, Jael is going to get the glory for this. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called out Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. 10,000 men went up at his heels, and Deborah went with him. Okay, if we were to continue reading in Judges 4, we would see that Barak and his 10,000 men are up at Mount Tabor. They charge down to meet Sisera and his army coming from the west on the valley floor. Okay, so they do battle here. Sisera runs away, and he's heading north by Mount Tabor, probably cutting through the horns of Hittim down Mount Arbel Pass. As he's going, he's allied with Heber the Kenite, whose wife Jael was from Kadesh by the sea, I think is probably more where they are. So she comes out to meet him as he's running. She's like, hey, come aside into our tent. Okay, so then of course she nails the tent peg through his temple, and there you go. There you have it. But he couldn't make it back up to Hatzor. That's where he's trying to retreat to. But let's indeed read Judges 5. This is Deborah's song. Let's take away the pins and put up our 12 tribes. I like tracing when tribes are mentioned, and then you just get a better sense of why things are that are said are said. Okay, so then sang Deborah and Barak the son of Abinoam on that day, the day of victory. Okay, that the leaders took the lead in Israel. This is a beautiful song that Deborah sings. And the people offered themselves willingly, bless the Lord. There's the best part of that song, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, remember Mount Seir is in Edom. So she's kind of thinking back to when the people came out of the wilderness wanderings into the land. When you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, even Sinai before the Lord. You know, Sinai's down here. The God of Israel, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, remember the woman that drove the tent peg through Sisera's temple. This tells me that Shamgar, the second judge we read about, that killed the Philistines with the ox goad, judges overlap. So when you read through the judges, some of them overlap in their ministries with one another. The highways were abandoned, the travelers kept to the byways. The Israelites couldn't just travel out in the open. They were oppressed by the Canaanites. The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased to be until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. Now, no doubt, Deborah, of course, does get glory out of this as well. We speak to her to this day, and we love her. When new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? It's a sorry state. Israelites are chasing after foreign gods. They had no power. My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel who offer themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way. To the sound of musicians at the watering places, there they repeat the righteous triumphs of the Lord, the righteous triumphs of his villagers in Israel. Then down to the gates march the people of the Lord. Okay, here's where it gets geographical. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, break out in a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then down marched the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for me against the mighty. From Ephraim, okay, the region of Ephraim, remember where Deborah is ministering down here. Their route, they marched down into the valley. Did they march down into the valley? They sure did, the valley of Jezreel. Following you, Benjamin, tribe of Benjamin, with your kinsmen, so apparently the tribe of Benjamin helped out in this effort. From Machir marched down the commanders. From Zebulun, those who bear the lieutenant's staff. So people from Zebulun, of course, how can they not help? They're caught up in the mess. Valley of Jezreel is being run roughshod over by the Canaanites for 20 years. The princes of Issachar, tribe of Issachar, came with Deborah, and Issachar faithful to Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Now, among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds? She calls out the Reubenites to hear the whistling for the flocks. Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. They apparently didn't answer the call, so she has some choice words for them. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. Gilead is this region over here. They stayed. So East Manasseh, some Gadites, they're like, good luck in your battle. Have fun storming the castle, and they're just like hanging out over there. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, this is before Dan went up to Laish. This was their tribal allotment, and they were kind of failures at dislodging the Canaanites there. But Dan, why did he stay with the ships? He's hanging out by Joppa, the only real port at this time. Asher sat still at the coast of the sea. Asher didn't help. Remember we talked about Asher a bit? They're just chilling, loving life up there. They're kind of off the beaten path. They're peaceful, they're rich. And they're just like, whatever. So she has choice words for the tribes that did not help out in this war effort. Staying by his landing. Zebulun is a people who risked their lives to the death. Good on you, Zebulun. Naphtali, too, on the heights of the field. And Naphtali is situated on heights. Naphtali helped out. The kings came, they fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan. Okay, now we're going to go back to the places. They fought the kings of Canaan at Ta'anak by the waters of Megiddo. Okay, so Barak charges down from Mount Tabor. He meets Sisera's army somewhere around here. Okay? Now, remember the Kishon River kind of flows across. Close to Ta'anak by the waters of Megiddo. So somewhere around here is this battle, right on this valley floor. Close to the modern, military airstrips here. They got no spoils of war, that is Sisera and the Canaanites. From heaven the stars fought, and this is a way of saying, God was in this. He was the one that achieved victory. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon, march on my soul with might. Okay, so verse 24, most blessed of women be Jael, that she killed Sisera. She was hardcore in that. And this is part of Deborah's song. I'd love to hear her sing this. She sent her hand to the tent peg and her right hand to the workman's mouth. She struck Sisera, crushed his head. I love that. Shattered and pierced his temple. Between her feet he sank, he fell, he lay still. Between her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. And Deborah's so hardcore, she starts taunting his mama. Verse 28. Out of the window she peered. The mother of Sisera wailed through the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariot? Her wisest princess's answer, indeed, she answers herself. Now, this is Sisera's mother thinking through Deborah's song. Have they not found and divided the spoil? She's like, Sisera should be out there dividing the spoil. A womb or two for every man. She knows what the men of the armies are going to do with their spoils of war. Don't think too hard on it. Spoil of dyed materials, blah, blah, blah. Verse 31, so may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might. And the land had rest for 40 years. I love Deborah's song. She calls out, she praises the tribes that helped. She calls out the ones who didn't. She sings about Sisera's demise, and she taunts his mom all along the way. And there you go. It's the beauty of Scripture. But that's all happening here. And when you read through a narrative of Scripture and you see the places, you're like, oh, I can totally see. And this is why I like to think about a certain young man, Nazareth, who's kind of wandering about, and he, just kind of wanders over to a ledge here, which is a lookout that we will go. And, from the ledge, I'll zoom up a little bit, look out over at biblical history. And I just love to imagine, Jesus looking out at the vantage point and looking over at Carmel, and he's like, that's where Elijah stood up for my name. Kind of looking out over, by the waters of Megiddo, and he looks over to Mount Tabor, and he's like, that's where Barak charged down to defend my people. Kind of looking over to Gilboa, and he's like, that's where Saul died, if only he would have been more faithful. Looking down over to Jabesh Gilead, that's where the men of Jabesh Gilead honored Saul, but whatever. And so he's just kind of looking out. But now, in ancient days, as the battle is going on, the little boys from these villages are like perching out with their packed lunches, like cheering on their side of the war. Finally get them after 20 years or whatever. And the rings of battle would be echoing across the valley floor. When you're in Israel and in a place like this and you're up top of the mountain, you can look across, miles across over the valley, and just, if there's construction going on there, you're hearing the hammers hitting the nails and the jackhammers and all that. Just Sound travels. That's something that hit my wife and I when we moved down to Texas. Up in Minnesota, the land of the trees and stuff, sound does not travel. Okay, and when we come down here and I get to work at Tarleton and I step out of my car and I'm hearing like construction noise from the other side of town, I'm like, whoa, this really does kind of remind me of this terrain. A lot of the central country of Texas is very similar to Israel. It's the same latitude. Sound travels. And we'll talk more about that too when we get to, flip around to the north, Sea of Galilee, when Jesus is teaching throngs of people. All he has to do is raise his voice and people can just hear him spread all across the hillside. That's how he can do something like the Sermon on the Mount with thousands of people of hearing him. He didn't have to have like a bullhorn or anything. Didn't have those. But the Valley of Jezreel, you can just see so much of history happening here. Let's flip over to the PowerPoint before I get too carried away. Okay. Now, we will, of course, begin with our theme quote that we love from Jerome. I never get tired of reading this. 5 Gospels record the life of Jesus. 4 you will find in books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the 1 you will find in the land they call holy. Read the 5th Gospel. This is his advice, and I echo this advice. Read the 5th Gospel, the land and the world of the 4 will open to you. The biggest selling point of going to Israel, that I like to tell people, is the Bible will make more sense to you having been there. It will just open itself up. You're like, oh, okay, now I get it. Not only the where, not only the how, but yes, indeed, even the why. All so that we can appreciate the who behind all the scriptures. Okay, Jokneam. This is looking down from Mount Carmel down to the tell of Jokneam. You can see this is just a classic Old Testament tell of how people of Jokneam could control the area because they can see what's coming. Jokneam now, there's some Crusader ruins there. Megiddo. When we're at Megiddo, we'll spend some time here and we will talk about a lot of stuff. But there's Megiddo. If I remember right, I think Megiddo had GPS-guided automatic lawnmowers back in the 1980s, which is crazy. Here is a model of Megiddo at the visitor center, and we can talk all about, how you'd have the gate complex where you'd have to make a 90-degree turn because it would slow the armies down and all that sort of stuff. And archers could pick them off from the top side. Okay, this is passing through the Canaanite gates. The Solomonic gates are actually up a little bit. The Solomonic 6-chambered gates. Megiddo, okay. This is a Canaanite sacrificial altar. You'll find animal bones and stuff. Probably human bones, I wouldn't be surprised. At Megiddo. Here is a picture that I'd like to include because what is this lifelike looking horse doing? Drinking water from what? From a trough. What is a trough? A manger. This is a manger, okay? Away in a manger. I don't love to. I don't love to do it. I have to do it. I ruin Christmas for you every step of the way. I've ruined Christmas a few different ways already. The manger was not a piece of wood. It was this. All over Israel, mangers are this. Everywhere you go. Jesus was laid in one of these, stone manger. And it doesn't matter, but little Christmas card and the desert scene with the 3 wise men and the wooden manger, all of it's wrong. This was a manger. This is the water system. The big cistern at Megiddo where you can come down the steps and whatever level the water's at, you can access it. Megiddo is famous for its water system. We'll climb up the tell as we enter Megiddo, but we will walk through the water system. You have a nice spring gushing out the side of the hill, living water. You want to cap that bad boy so invaders can't access it, and then you dig down from your city and over to access the spring from underneath. So you can get your fresh water during a siege and the enemy can't get at it. So we go down and we go through the tunnel, and this is a diagram. At the visitor center of Megiddo, you put a city wall around. Of course, it was walled. And then you go down the shaft, down to the tunnel, to the spring, cap it off over there. Now, remember when David and Joab took Jerusalem. Joab found how to get through. They found the hidden spring and found out how to get through. He climbs up the shaft to Jerusalem to take it over. This is looking out over, this is from Armageddon. This is Armageddon right here. Okay, so armies of the world gathered in that lush, fertile valley that Napoleon would have loved to wage a battle there. Ta'anak, not much there. I mean, this is in the wild, not like formal excavations or anything, but you can just see kind of ancient ruins there. View from Ta'anak. Ibleam, who cares too much about Ibleam? Jezreel, this is the summer palace. Some excavations have gone on from time to time here, nothing too major, but this was Ahab and Jezebel's summer palace, would have been up here on this hill. This is looking down at what I think and other scholars think was Naboth's vineyard area from Jezreel. I took that picture, a dead giveaway, because my little water stain mark on the lens here, which always bugs me whenever I see my pictures. But Ein Harod, this is the spring where Gideon had to, have his men go down and drink to see which of the 300 would be left over. Mount Gilboa, you can see the valley of Jezreel, how it spills off into the Jordan Rift. On the other side is the country of Jordan. Mount Gilboa. David cursed it because he was mad at Mount Gilboa because that's where Saul died. This is the Jordan Rift. Hill of Moreh, looking from kind of Jezreel, where you have Endor back there, Ophrah over there, Shunem, Nain on the other side. Mount Tabor, there it is, just poking up out of the valley floor. This is where Barak and his 10,000 men charged down, off into the valley floor. There's the church on top. Yep, the church up top that commemorates the possible location of the Transfiguration. But this is a good vantage point too. You can just see the valley of Jezreel. It's fertile, it's beautiful, it's all around you. And it's just, you drive around the valley of Jezreel. It's peaceful. I love the Jezreel Valley. Love spending time there. That's the Jezreel Valley. Any thoughts and questions? It's probably the fastest I've cruised through a region. So if anything pops into your mind, please share or ask, because we're going to look at Lower Galilee next to try to get ahead of things a little bit. But appreciate the valley there. It connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan. This is from the river to the sea here. Okay, so when they say to the river to the sea, I'm thinking of good times in Jezreel. Okay. River to the sea. Okay, so the Galilee regions. Now, we know Galilee from, of course, the Sea of Galilee here, this harp-shaped sea. But these here are the regions of Galilee. Lower Galilee, Upper Galilee, because of elevation, and then Sea of Galilee over here. Back to our pins. The north side of the Valley of Jezreel, you'll never guess why they call it the Nazareth Ridge. Golden star to anybody who can figure that out. But you can see the Jezreel Valley floor go up into this ridge, Nazareth Ridge. This modern road, we will drive up through the tunnel up to there. We will go out of this vantage point and look out over the valley floor. But Nazareth now, as you can see, it's the big suburban sprawl. Back in Jesus' day, it was a backwater village. Here's the Church of the Annunciation that goes back to Byzantine times. Goes back to the 2nd century where there was an ancient Jewish synagogue here. A synagogue in Jesus' day. And then they started popping churches over this spot. There's no reason to doubt that this is the spot. I mean, the ancient village of Nazareth is so small, it's just right around here. And this is the church that commemorates Gabriel announcing to Mary, Church of the Annunciation, you are with child by the Holy Spirit. This is the biggest church structure in the Middle East. And, the Pope will come here and have big masses and stuff. But that's Nazareth. Backside of Nazareth Ridge. Okay, we kind of have this ridge structure here. It spills down into another valley. Now we have valleys crisscrossing west to east. Turon Valley, Beit Netofa Valley, Beit Harem Valley up here. As the winds come off the Mediterranean Sea by Haifa, they cut through these valleys, and by the time they cross the plain of Gennesaret onto the Sea of Galilee, the winds just whip up out of nowhere. Okay, even modern fishermen can be caught unawares by storms that come in raging storms, because this bowl-shaped sea, the winds come in off the Mediterranean and start swirling around. And you can get some big storms. I know it's hard to imagine a big storm on the Sea of Galilee at any point, but if you can maybe think of where that might happen in the Bible, Golden Star. But they cross the valleys. So the Nazareth Ridge, on the backside as it slopes down, we have Gath Hefer. Remember what prophet was from Gath Hefer? Jonah from Gath Hefer. He's supposed to go northeast, to go southwest. It's interesting in Jesus' day when they're like, see that, and they're kind of trying to smack down Nicodemus. They're like, see that no prophet arises from Galilee. Really? Yeah, one did. Okay. This is the Galilee region, Gath Hefer. Now, the backside is Sepphoris. This is a very important place. This town of Sepphoris started to be built up in Herod Antipas's day. Herod Antipas, Herod the Great's son, in 4 BC, he starts building up Sepphoris. This becomes kind of the administrative seat of government for Rome in the northern part of Israel. And big, huge building projects. As Jesus was young and Joseph is still, leading his family, they're back living in Nazareth. Big, huge building project that would have gathered all the builders from the area would have gone to Sepphoris. I have no doubt that as Jesus is growing up, him and his younger brothers are, of course, going to follow their dad to work. They're going to go to work with him. And what better building project in Jesus' youth than Sepphoris? That absolutely would have gathered everybody from the area finding work. Now, Joseph was a carpenter. The Greek word is teknon, which means builder. What's the building material that you are working with mostly in Israel? Stone. Okay, now he would have worked with wood, would have worked with anything. But stone, by and large, was that primary building material. So think of Joseph as a stonemason, as a stone worker. Okay, now he would have worked with wood as well. But that's what a teknon, a carpenter, was. So Jesus grew up as a stonemason, not Masonic Lodge, not stonemason like that. Trust me, nothing like that, nothing like that. Worked with stone. So I have no doubt, just a couple miles away from Sepphoris, come on, ruler, 3.5 miles. Every day, you're walking down the Nazareth Ridge, down to Sepphoris, putting in a day's work and going back. I have no doubt Joseph is doing that with his sons. So Jesus, I'm sure, helped build Sepphoris. Okay, Sepphoris has, you can see the theater here. It was a big Roman city. And all of Herod Antipas's efforts were to build up Sepphoris as the seat of power. Across the valley from Hanathon, which in the Old Testament times would have been an important kind of seat of power as well. Hanathon there. We'll finish just with this here. Well, I'll kind of cruise through it. There's not a lot to talk about these pins. The Turan Valley, Turan Ridge, Beit Netofa Valley. Turan Valley is where a lot of the world's traffic probably could have crossed through. Beit Netofa, it closes off on the east, so that's just kind of an out-of-the-way valley. You have to, live here to be here, which is what people like in their neighborhoods, I guess. Cana of Galilee is probably this right here. There's an alternate location that is the tourist location right around here on the Nazareth Ridge, Cana. So you go and they have wine shops, water into wine, all that sort of stuff. And then you can renew your vows here. Because if you're going to Cana, what better place to have a wedding or have some wine, whatever, because of what happened in Cana. I think most likely it was here, Tel Kana, and this is probably where John 2, water into wine, happened here. But think about it, Mary's relative is getting married, and they're from Nazareth. She's from Nazareth. By this point, Jesus is already, I think, kind of starting to set up shop in Capernaum. But you can almost kind of on a clear day look down in the valley and see, oh, they're getting the wedding preparations going, blah, blah, blah. So you go to Cana. Up here is Jotapata. This is a very important city in Josephus' account of the Jewish War, the Roman Jewish War. Vespasian comes, and they have this. Josephus goes into great detail about the siege of Jotapata, and that's where Vespasian encounters Josephus, if you know much about the history there. And Josephus tells Vespasian, oh, I have a prophecy, you're going to be emperor someday, which saves his skin because they're slaughtering all the people. And so Vespasian likes Josephus. So Josephus kind of then joins up with the Romans and the rest of their conquest in 66 AD of Israel. And he kind of becomes like the court historian almost for the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian and his son Titus, both of whom become Roman emperors. Up here we have Beit Harem Valley, Ramah Ridge, Mount Merom, the waters of Merom are where Joshua encounters Jabin of Hatzor. So, not going to spend too much time going over the geography of this, just hills and valleys, rough terrain, kind of backwater. So, can anything good arise out of Nazareth? That kind of was that attitude of like, oh, you're up there, you're like, whatever, you're just up there, So, I will, however, with the 9 minutes we have left, go through the slideshow of the places I just talked to you about. Okay, there's Jerome. Yay. Nazareth. That's what it looks like now. Kind of nice suburban sprawl. It's a nice area. Church of the Annunciation, kind of down here. This is the Church of the Annunciation. Joel's book, Where God Came Down, has a lot of, it has a section on, so Joel Kramer's book, Where God Came Down, is 10 sites in Israel where God has communicated or contacted earth in some way. And the Church of the Annunciation is one of these places. He goes into good detail of the layers of archaeology there, Jewish synagogue level, Byzantine church, Crusader, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, this was Mary's hometown. They tried to plop it over where they thought Mary's house actually was. Who knows that specific plot of the ground. But this is the town of Nazareth. And this is, yeah, where Mary encountered Gabriel. This is that Nazareth overlook. And this is a picture that just gives you a good sense of like what you can see for miles and miles and miles. And you're looking down and like stuff that's going on over here on a clear day, you can kind of hear it. You can just absorb all the sights and sounds of all the area around. So if you're back in, Barrack's day, you're watching from up on Nazareth Ridge, you can see him in the distance charging down, and as he's making his way across the valley floor, you're like, yeah, go, Barrack, we love you. We wish we could fight for you, but you know what, whatever. And so they're going, and you can just see biblical history unfold, and you can look out over the hill of Moreh, Mount Tabor. It's beautiful from up there. It's wonderful. It's windy, too, up there. This site is the traditional location. You'll read a plaque about how the villagers of Nazareth chased Jesus off a cliff. This is where they say it happened. I don't know if it's quite that far from Nazareth. It doesn't really matter. But they have a plaque there that tells about the story. And in their view, it's like, oh, Jesus jumped off and then disappeared or whatever. They kind of take some creative license with that. But a place like this. Oh, this is the Golden Crown Hotel that I've stayed at Nazareth. I liked it. That's probably why I liked it. I took a picture of this because I walked by it, and my girls were so young, and I thought of them when I walked by. So that pulls on my heartstrings. Gath Hefer, where Jonah's from. No real digs have gone on here, but this is where he was from. Sepphoris. This, okay, you see it crisscrossed by these square bulks, these archaeological squares about 5 feet by 5 feet. What they would do if they're being systematic is they'll kind of section off these bulks, these artificially created little squares of sandbags and stuff. And sometimes when they're done, they'll remove the bulks, but sometimes they just leave them behind there. So they have excavated a ton of the Roman city of Sepphoris. Here's a big walkway. This might have been the Cardo, the main street that cuts across the city. Ruts in here from wagon wheels over time that would just go back and forth. Pillars on either side. This would have been a bustling marketplace. Shops lined either side of the street. Mosaics left over from Jesus' day. Did Jesus help make some of these mosaics? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's helping build this city with his father and his brothers. I have no doubt part of this was done by Jesus' hand. Who knows? Theater, this is a good picture of reconstruction and original. Some theaters are in better original condition than just this. We'll see one at Scythopolis, Bethshan. But this is reconstruction where they can hold events in modern day at the site of the ancient Roman theater. This is some of the mosaics that have been found at Sepphoris. Mosaics were beautiful. I mean, it was just artistry par excellence. Hanathon, the Old Testament tell, in the Old Testament times, it was kind of more the seat of administrative authority. Beit Netophah Valley, you can just see these fertile, lush valleys. Just beautiful. Cana of Galilee, where I think was a location of the water turned to wine, what's left of the town, of course, Over the millennia, the earth reclaims itself. Jotapata, where Josephus was from, and they held out against the Romans for a while until the Romans conquered them. Vespasian meets Josephus. Josephus hooks up with Vespasian from that point on. Leftover ruins of Jotapata. Mount Merom, at the base by the waters of Merom, Joshua fought against the Canaanites and the northern conglomeration of them, alliance. Okay, we'll end at Zaphat. Well, I have a few more minutes. I'd feel horribly guilty and felt like I'm robbing you all if we finish early. So I just can't do it. Zaphat is up off the northwest part of the Sea of Galilee. I like making progress because I want to spend more time at Galilee itself. We have a lot to talk about Jesus' ministry. Zaphat is this town, we will end with Zaphat, up on the hills, that as Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, down here, Church of the Beatitudes, that's the right spot. I'm convinced of where the Sermon on the Mount is happening. When he says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden, I imagine him pointing up to this town. Maybe the sun is starting to set and the village lights are up. This is traditionally one of the spots that he might have pointed. The city on the hill cannot be hidden. Look at that. Look at Zaphat. Maybe. Zaphat in modern day is, all right, if some of you are artists, forgive me, but you know how artists kind of can kind of be, you know what I mean, people, right? Yeah, okay. Artists, they're interesting folk, right? They're great. They're brilliant with their art. Zaphat is kind of a hippie town these days, right? And so they have like art festivals up here and stuff, and they'll go up to Zaphat, and it's like kind of this just, dude love kind of place, whatever. I'll show you pictures of it. Zaphat is up here on the hill. It's a city that can't be hidden. That's quite for sure. It's a beautiful place. I mean, I wouldn't mind living at Zaphat. It'd be interesting, the people that you interact with. But look, it's just beautiful. Wonderful. The climate up in this area too is it's awesome. It's not hot and humid. It's just light and airy, and it's cooler. And this is just beautiful. I don't know who owns this house, but I'd like to be friends with them. Okay. Hot Sword, we'll start with Hot Sword next time. That is a very important location. So we end with Zaphat. Any thoughts, questions, comments? I mean, Valley of Jezreel, there is a lot going on. There are a lot more scriptures we could have read through. I feel guilty not touching some of them, but that's the Valley of Jezreel. Let's finish in prayer. Father, we love you so much, and we thank you for your work through history, that we can see you at work as we read the scriptures. As we learn finer points of geography and all that sort of stuff, they're curiosities, they're points of interest, but Father, may we learn all that stuff so that we can better appreciate what you have done and what you are yet to do. Father, we love you and we just thank you for all that you are, and we pray that you soften our hearts and sharpen our minds to who you are as revealed in the scriptures. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you all.
I use a lot of digital imagery in my work, and you are correct about the topography. It's very similar. You get up in the north part of Erith County, it's probably not as extreme, but it is very similar.
It is, yeah. Hills of Judah. That struck us when we moved down here. When we were driving around at our first days here, it's like, this reminds us of Judean hills.
It looks like
it's the
every
same.
square inch of available land is cultivated, like they do tobacco in Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's on the side of the road.